Hello, this is Alex Mozet, and welcome to Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle between large tech monopolies and traditional incumbents. So we're going to get to TikTok last today because, I don't know, every day that thing just keeps changing. It's a moving target. And the first topic is on what I'm calling the Yay Combinator. Basically what this is Kanye released a series of tweets. When I spoke to Katie Jacobs, who's on the board of Vivendi, we decided to create a Y Combinator for the music industry so that artists have the power and transparency to be in control of their future. No more shady contracts, no more lifelong deals. A few tweets here. Y Combinator started companies like Dropbox, Airbnb. For the first time, it cleaned up contracts and made venture capital transparent. If you don't know, really what Y Combinator introduced was this thing called the SAFE agreement. It's basically what has now become a somewhat standardized convertible note structure for investors to invest, in early stage startups where the valuation is not as easily definable. So you're investing as debt that can convert in, it's a note, it's debt that can convert into equity. Actually, it gives a lot of power to the startup. So if you're a startup in Y Combinator, you have a lot of leverage over investors in terms of governance and board seats and these kinds of things. So the SAFE agreement has actually been spreading rampantly to a lot of different startups, and it's actually become a little bit of a problem, a little bit untenable for investors to be able to push back against the structure and put more governance or more structure. These are early stage businesses. So, where the SAFE agreement was designed for Y Combinator companies, frankly, not every startup is a Y Combinator caliber business and actually needs more governance and could actually benefit the business to have more governance. So you've actually seen the SAFE agreement, I would argue, become too widely popular amongst early stage startups, like seed stage startups, right? These are very early stage businesses. And now you're taking a multi-million-dollar check from investors and they have little to no governance over that investment. Kind of worrying. Anyway, I digress. So Y Combinator here, it empowered startups with the tools to succeed and grow their business. It changed the Silicon Valley game, according to Kanye. Contracts in all industries need to be simplified now. Complicated contracts are how businesses, music companies, and sports take advantage of talent. We will expose these contracts and make them transparent now to support new talent startups and amend old contracts. Lots of very valid points from this. The music industry, as we've spoken about, believe it or not, is actually widely consolidated. It is not fragmented, despite there being millions and millions of artists. And every day there's a new artist. And still somehow there are basically four companies, the consolidated record label, music label companies that, when Spotify does deals, they're basically negotiating with one entity, the RIAA, the Record Industry Association or something like that, which basically negotiates on behalf of the four major record labels. It's a thing of beauty, well done by the music business companies, the record companies. But again, it to Kanye's point, it does take the leverage away from the artists and put it into the hands of the record labels. And it also puts companies like Spotify in a precarious position. And that's why Spotify's margins, and we've talked about them wanting to shift more to the podcast community, which is fragmented. There aren't big record labels owning up all those podcast people like Joe Rogan. Spotify is having issues with Joe Rogan, apparently, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit here. But anyway, I think point well taken. How could you bring more fragmentation? How could you break the stranglehold in the music industry to enable artists and up and coming bands and groups to have more control over, what they're signing, for how long, what exclusivity, what rights, right? I mean, they have very little leverage because it's such a winner take all industry. Not winner take all. Sorry. It's such a hit driven industry, right? You either make it and it's a 0.001% of artists, and then everyone else is kind of floundering. until you break out. That these artists, just don't have much capital or leverage with your typical record label. So a lot of the power is in their hands. So be curious to see how an accelerator model could help take, the cream of the crop of up and coming artists and maybe change that. We'll see. But I'd be curious to see if Kanye can get a traction here. If he's got to stick with it though, but could be something there. So next topic is, so I had Benedict Evans on the show last week. It was a great interview with Benedict. Guy is brilliant, extremely sharp. We talked about a whole slew of topics from of course, TikTok and ARM deal to Netflix, our favorite Netflix. We see eye to eye a lot on many topics, Netflix included. The state of media, protectionism, regulation, just geopolitical and tech, and just all these kinds of things. And so there's one part of it where we were talking about the role of tech protectionism, and particularly as it comes to TikTok ban and these kinds of things. And I didn't want to push too much further, but this was one part of that interview which stuck with me, which I wanted to revisit. Isn't that basically what's happened to U.S. companies wanting to operate in China for the past 20, 30 years?
Well, no, it's happened to a tiny subset of US companies in China. I mean, you could name them on the fingers of one hand.
I mean tech companies, or
tech companies.
Larger software companies.
I think you could name like maybe 3 or maybe 4 US companies that can't operate in China on that basis. So, and either way, I mean, I don't think there's an old line about protectionism that just because somebody else puts rocks in their harbor, that doesn't mean that you should put rocks in yours. Clearly there's a bargaining position in there, but you're not going to bargain China into turning off censorship of the internet. So that's not a terribly productive position.
It did strike me, as I'm sure for other people that were listening, you say, 3 or 4 tech companies. Is it really 3 or 4 tech companies that have been banned from working in China? Is that real? So I decided to look into this, right? So here are all the great major U.S. tech companies blocked by China's Great Firewall. Here's my list. Okay, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Snapchat. That's 4. Now we're at 5. Reddit, Tumblr, Pinterest, 8, Slack, 9, Twitch, 10, Discord, 11, Dropbox, 12, Quora, 13, Medium, 14, Wikipedia, 15. Not surprised on that one. Vimeo, 16, Flickr, 17. Flickr, is that still around? SoundCloud, 18, DuckDuckGo, 19 now, Dailymotion. I think this is a video sharing site. Yeah. 20. That's 20. I got another list here. Top 100 plus websites blocked in China. And this one does a nice job. It buckets them into social websites and apps. So you can see, some of the ones that I was just listening. Any content any social network, right? Any social network where people are just going to communicate freely and communicate with each other and share ideas openly, or somewhat openly these days. Bam. Okay, those are definitely not allowed. Blogging websites and platforms like they don't have Medium on here, but they've got Blogger and WordPress, and so another form of content creation and expression. Email, Gmail, I'm sure, Yahoo too, Yahoo, and search engines. Interesting why Baidu would be on this list. That seems a little odd. Maybe it's because it needs to be, that's Baidu.com. Maybe it needs to be, Baidu.cn. I don't know. Messaging apps, WhatsApp, right? We were talking about, we can't ban WeChat because now no one's going to be able to communicate into China. This is the reason why no one is able to communicate into China. It's because China bans all of the messaging apps. It's not because the United States and India are looking at banning WeChat. It's not. It's the other way around. Yet everyone in the media wants to say, we can't ban WeChat. Then we can't communicate with China. No, it's not the US's fault. It's China's fault because they ban all the apps. Streaming apps and websites. Here you go. Here's another whole list. News websites, of course. And these are a bunch of linear. These are just, traditional media. Cloud storage. This was interesting. I hadn't necessarily thought about this right away, but you got Dropbox, you got Box on here. You got, a bunch of cloud storage ones. Sure, Snowflake is banned, which we're going to talk about later. Yeah, and then you've got Quora and GitHub and, just kind of an other category of a bunch of other things here. Point is, it's hundreds of US tech companies that have been banned. Anything that has free expression or just content that the CCP doesn't want people to digest, it gets banned. It's very counter to this notion that it's just a handful of US tech companies. No, US tech companies and probably, and not just US, but just many international or just foreign tech companies are just wholesale banned from operating in China. Now you've got the list to prove it. And, we just clearly from a trade and a reciprocity standpoint, we just don't have parity where there's one rule, one set of rules to operate in China, which is basically you can't operate in China if you're a tech company of any material substance that can't be controlled or monitored by the CCP. And then now, if you're the United States, then, until basically the past few years, maybe starting with the CFIUS strike down of Grindr, but now certainly in the past few months, more specifically with the WeChat and TikTok ban, we are now starting to see a shift in our foreign policy as it relates to technology and Chinese technology companies operating in China. And I made this point in the interview, which is everyone likes to just lump, well, how are foreign tech companies going to operate in the United States? What are those holistic rules? And this isn't really about foreign tech companies. This is really about Chinese tech companies. And China has the largest tech community outside of the United States. And there's very clear issues around national security and all these things, but also just fair trade and reciprocity. Can our companies go operate there? And can their companies operate here? Why would you allow a double standard? Right? I think that's a lot of the crux of this. We talk about it in depth with Benedict, and I think it's a really great session back and forth. I think you should all go listen to it. We're seeing this clearly happen. Now, I'm going to talk more about TikTok later today, but it's interesting around this rhetoric from tech companies and the role of the U.S. as kind of being an evildoer, right? And why is that? I've spoken about that on the show, especially these large tech monopolies. So that's the next topic here, which is interesting with Snowflake. If you don't know what Snowflake is, I'll give you a little bit of primer here. This is their website. It's the cloud data platform. Just think of it as aggregating all of your different data, helping you to analyze it, put business tools and intelligence tools on top of it. Nice little graphic here. It's just pooling together all one platform, one copy of data, many workloads, permissioning, all these apps on top. You say, okay, well, where does AWS and Google Cloud and all these things fit in? It sits on top of all of those. You got Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, all down here. And then they've got all their stuff on top, right? So it can take your stuff out of the cloud, or it can kind of work across a variety of these different cloud storage solutions. It can centralize that and then help you do a lot of other things with your data on top of that. Interestingly enough, they also have a data marketplace, little platform dynamic here. Haven't done the full scrub on them. Their platform revenue ratios probably aren't going to cut it as it relates to Plaid, because I think this is probably a newer but growing part of their business. It's really a SaaS business primarily. But here you can go and buy third-party data sources from other business partners and other data providers. So I thought that was, they are, see here, featured data sets for COVID research, a bunch of different data providers. You can buy that stuff. Bloomberg has a similar model where you can buy kind of data and apps that plug into the Bloomberg terminal that help analysts, get different data sources at their fingertips. So kind of an interesting marketplace type, they call them marketplace platform model here that they've got going. So What I thought was really interesting, though, from the Snowflake CEO, this guy's the man. There's this part of the interview which was so good that I wanted us all to listen to.
Frank, you're a true American success story. If I have it right, you came here from the Netherlands in 1984, and now you're reportedly worth $1.8 billion. I know it's not something you watch, but a real success story here. Capitalism is really under fire in this country. What are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I'm the biggest bull on this country in every way. It pains me to see Americans, native-born ones, to be down on this country. Most of my fellow immigrants think they have hit the lottery being here. I've lived it. I didn't speak English very well. It wasn't even my second language when I came here. I had $100 in my pocket. You don't get there by sitting back and waiting for things to happen to you. You got to get after it. That's what this country is all about. But it's no surprise that so many people want to come here. That pretty much says it all.
The guy's 100% right. He's 100% right, and he's lived it. He came over here with $100 in 1984 from the Netherlands. A serial entrepreneur, and has run and taken multiple companies public. The video that we did about Palantir's CEO, echoing similar comments, right, about just the role of U.S. tech companies working with, Department of Defense, the U.S. military, and how it's a problem that other of the large U.S. tech monopolies, Google especially, you can call them out, but it is a problem why they don't feel an allegiance, or rather, they feel like there's a problem to work with the U.S. government agencies. And it was interesting because with Benedict also too, when I was talking about tech protectionism and did the EU mess up? Should the EU have done more tech protectionism in its early days, kind of like what China did, to help breed and prevent U.S. tech monopolies from coming in and just filling that void, filling that vacuum, and allowing your VC community to and your tech community to build. I'd say initially he had to think about it, and then eventually I think he came around to it, and he said it was one of multiple things. Sure, but tech protectionism, and as we've seen China play it out, I'd say it's worked really well for them. EU really didn't do it at all. U.S. companies are just about equally, if not in some cases more dominant in Europe than they are in the United States. And you think about this stuff with TikTok, which we're going to get into. Trust me, we're going to get into the TikTok stuff. But it's just really interesting when you think about these large U.S. tech monopolies. Do these tech monopolies really identify as U.S. companies anymore? Do they really just see themselves as like their own nation state? Benedict was making the point that, every sovereign country, whether it's France or the UK, they have the ability to regulate how a business operates in its respective country. Yet when the United States decides to take action against WeChat and TikTok, somehow we have become, these horrible people. Why would we ever do such a thing? It seems so obvious to me why you would do it. All the reasons I've just been laying out here. Yet at the same time, when you have U.S. tech companies that don't want to work with the Department of Defense or the military, it's also fine. And there's real problems with this. And it goes back to what Frank's point here, which is that this country, the Constitution, the liberties, the rights that are afforded to us, which are being tread upon, by the way, which I'm going to touch on, which is not okay, enables us this sense of innovation and entrepreneurship and pursuing the American dream. This country is great. And we have a lot of things to be really proud of. And when you see these U.S. tech companies acting more like their own nation states that don't feel any allegiance and don't feel any need, or think it wrong to work with the U.S. government, U.S. military, it's a serious issue. And it's really, it's not appropriate. And it just seems like a lot of folks kind of turn the blind eye or, don't make too much of a deal of it. But to me, it's actually a much deeper fundamental concern about why that would be the case. Now, for example, if it would be the case because we see the NSA, the FBI, the CIA imposing upon citizens civil liberties, spying on citizens, overstepping their boundaries as it relates to what information they can procure about Americans and how they do it. We've covered this many times, whether it's Five Eyes or more recently what we've seen with the presidential campaign stuff. These intelligence agencies absolutely have gotten way too powerful. Their access to data on American citizens has basically gone unchecked, and somehow they just know they continue to be expanding their power. That's not okay. But that's not the objection as to why U.S. tech companies don't want to work with the U.S. government, right? Instead, it's over these other, concerns about like morality or these kinds of things. And when you take a giant step back and you look at the role, again, let's bring it full circle to TikTok, the Chinese government using tech companies, whether it's physical tech companies, Huawei, software tech companies, TikTok and WeChat and the like, to enforce, their political opinion and will both inside of China and outside of China. This is the third leg of the stool for geopolitics. It is the economy, it is military, and the third leg of the stool is technology, whether both physical tech infrastructure and software. And for some reason, China understands this intimately, but many people, maybe some people in the U.S. are now starting to wake up to this. But certainly, it has not reached a certain level of either awareness in the public to recognize that certain, that behavior is really inappropriate, and the moral pretense that the lack of cooperation is not engaged in, right? Those reasons why they're not doing it don't add up, and are in many cases just not well founded or are not based in reality or what's going on. And instead, we need to see much closer cooperation between U.S. tech companies and the U.S. Government and military resources and all these kinds of things. And this idea of being a patriot, of supporting your country, right? And how these types of topics are now potentially like contrarian statements. So that's what I think Frank is getting at, Snowflake CEO. And, we're attacking this from multiple sides on the show, this topic. It's not going away. Hopefully it starts to change for the better. I think these types of actions, TikTok, WeChat, etc., Huawei, are starting to build a movement, are starting to get people to wake up to what's really going on here. And how the CCP is very smart. What China is doing is very smart. We've covered the 50 Cent Army. We've covered so many things that they're doing to advance their technology businesses, both in China, in India, in other markets, the U.S. They're very smart. Look at the tech companies they're building in China. I mean, you can't underestimate them as a competitor and as a military force, and what they're doing with the data and what they could do with the data and the influence. We've seen them wield the influence before. We've seen them take action on Hong Kong, both from a technology standpoint, economic and military standpoint. I don't know. It's just time for people to get smart and I think, support this country. If this country has helped you build a career, build a business, all these kinds of things that has helped afford to so many Americans, immigrants like Frank, native-born individuals and others. There's a lot to really be thankful for, to be proud of, and to continue to work with U.S. government agencies, with a caveat around using that technology to spy on American citizens. There are certain lines, but those were not the reasons. Those were not the pretense used as to why these tech companies don't want to work with the U.S. government. It wasn't around civil liberties and protecting Americans' rights. That was not, and has not really been the topic here. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see if some of these nation states, these technology nation states, feel differently. Maybe some of the founder-led ones, where you still have, you have less of that kind of like external manager, a Sundar, and maybe a little bit with like a Zuckerberg. But then again, you have Amazon, and Amazon really has not been a beacon for this kind of cooperation either. But I would say, Google probably being one of the worst. Anyway, we'll continue to dig into this. Let's finally get to the last topic here, which is TikTok. So this is a moving ball. The TikTok stuff has been all over the place. The recent deal, I'm sure everyone is familiar with, is Oracle takes 12.5%, Walmart takes 7.5%, 20%. The argument is that because American VC and institutional investors own roughly 40% of ByteDance, okay, and if ByteDance owns 80%, that's effectively a 32% ownership in TikTok. Following me? Right? So 32% plus the 20 says, oh, well, look, TikTok is majority controlled by Americans. I don't buy it. It's a nice loophole. It's a nice kind of optics, like, 40% times, right? 0.4 times 0.8 is 0.32 plus 0.2. And now you're at 0.52, 52% ownership in TikTok. Magic. So it's a nice loophole. I think, the problem with analyzing the TikTok situation is there really isn't a lot of information out there. You're kind of just getting your information through leaked reports that many of times are not true. So here's what we do know. We do know those numbers. That's the proposal. We do know that they're proposing a 5-person board, Walmart being one of the board members, and Zhang, the CEO of ByteDance, has 1 board seat. The other 4 board seats are from, either Americans or American businesses that are filling those 4 out of 5 board seats. Okay, that is some good level of governance, right? They're saying they want an IPO, which means that there would be presumably more ownership, but that could be any public individual. We also know the Chinese government has restricted the export of AI and certain IP out of China. So I have 2 big questions here. And a lot of this comes back to the national security concern. One is TikTok, if TikTok is spun out, are they now licensing this IP, this AI from ByteDance? It seems like that's the situation. So if TikTok is licensing this IP from ByteDance, so now TikTok US doesn't have access to the source code, right? Because they're licensing it. Why would you show your licensee the source code for the thing they're licensing? The answer is you wouldn't. You would give them, a program, an executable program, a file that is going to be analyzing the data now stored in Oracle servers in the United States. And then, but this program, think about the recommendation engine, right? What goes onto my newsfeed? That program is going to be coming from source code in China, given, let's call it an executable file, given to TikTok in the United States. It's going to be running on Oracle servers, analyzing the data in Oracle servers, and then spitting back, recommendations to American users. Anyone else think that could be a problem? I do. That's point one. How do you really know what's in the black box of the recommendation engine, let's call it? The answer is you don't. Is this thing going to be sending stuff back to China? Do you know that? Can you shut it down? They got back doors there. You don't know because it's a black box. And you'll never know because you're licensing it from China. You can't go through the source code. You can't do the kind of audits that you want to do. So, yeah, you're kind of stuck there. That's point one. Point two is, in the press release, they're saying that they're going to create 25,000 jobs in the United States. And I think that plan needs to be a lot tighter, right? Over how many years? What's the transition plan? Are there still going to be Chinese employees, engineers, namely, product people, namely, working in China? What is the timeline and the plan to transition over the servers, the data, the engineering team, the product team, right? And is that going to be fully out of China? Is that going to be, a mix over year 1 and 2, and then year 3 it's gone? These have been my problems from the get-go with this deal. You know, we can rewind the clock and the tape on this, that I've just shuddered at the thought of this deal. Actually went on Fox News, Fox Business, and said the same thing on Maria Bartiromo's show. This deal just gives me the jitters. So, do I think this deal will get done with this Oracle thing? I actually don't think it will. I actually don't think it's going to get done. I've been skeptical on a deal working out for TikTok for, I don't know, since day one. The media has misreported on this every step of the way. On September 15th, Jim Cramer came out and said that this is a done deal, approved. Now we heard more recently from the president that TikTok needs to be majority controlled by Oracle. Well, that's not currently the case. And we're waiting on China to approve this deal. The timeline has been extended another week. I just don't see a way to satisfy the concerns around national security, around data, privacy, these kinds of things, and American ownership. You know, it's really a loophole to say our 40% American ByteDance investors now equate to 52% ownership in TikTok. If you just think about it from a governance standpoint and all these kinds of things, that's why they're trying to placate the governance issues with 4 out of 5 board members are American. But, you know, there's just so many known unknowns. I don't think there's any way you can concretely, or even with not even 100% conviction, but even just a high degree of confidence, say that whatever you're licensing from China is not going to violate the concerns we had in the first place, right? Because you still have a back door, which is a main part of the app, the black box recommendation engine, which presumably is going to be licensed here. No one else has really definitively reported on how that's going to happen. But that is a pretty big issue here, not to mention just the personnel and the transferring and all that kind of stuff. So, this thing is not a done deal by any means. And who knows? China may put other clamps down on it. Doesn't even seem like Trump is totally sold on the current construct of the deal. I don't know. There's so many moving parts, and there's so many things that could come out in another week or a month as you get more fidelity. Again, this is just a super high level plan, right? They had multiple bids. They were running a selling process. You're not really deep in the nuts and bolts of what's the technical process, right? So when CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, when they were shutting down the grinder sale to that Chinese company, they run an investigation. They do a lot of technical diligence on that transaction, and they delivered their report on that and struck down the sale. Similarly, CFIUS already ran a review on TikTok. I think last year we covered it on the show, which was them reporting these national security concerns in the first place. So, you know, what is CFIUS's role in all of this? Obviously, this has been driven by the White House, but I think when you get down to the nuts and bolts of these kinds of technical concerns, there's going to be other stakeholders here to ensure that these more technical matters are factored in, even if at a high level, the governance and ownership stuff gets signed off on. So this to me it's a fun news cycle item. So I put it but the reason I put it at the end of the cycle is just because, in my mind, it's kind of just a lot of noise. The media loves to get worked up into a tizzy over it, but it's kind of much ado about nothing. In my mind, this thing's pretty much already done. It's a done deal in the sense that it's going to be banned. What is interesting though is that the WeChat ban was actually challenged in the courts, and they got an extension on that to be banned off of the app stores. But once the judicial process plays itself out, I think the White House, the executive branch, is full within its powers that be to regulate these foreign companies operating in the United States, and that ban on WeChat that's going through for sure. The TikTok thing I think is also a done deal, just in the other direction, but we'll see if either party, it's really a political back and forth at this point. We'll see where they net out, but I think it's going to be a drawn out process. Probably not going to end nicely for TikTok. That's for sure. It's probably why you saw Kevin Mayer leave. Now, what was it? Maybe a month ago or so. The former executive from Disney, who was TikTok's CEO, and said, "Yeah, I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with this anymore." He could probably see the writing on the wall also. So that's it for us today on Winner Take All. Thank you very much for joining us, and I will talk to you later this week.